Yes Music Podcast, episode 170, an interview with Clive Bayley from Mabel Greer's Toy Shop.
This is John Davison, and you're listening to Yes Music Podcast.
Hi, this is Jeff Dales, and you're listening to Yes Music Podcast.
Hi, this is Steve Howe, and you're listening to me on the Yes Music Podcast. Have a good time. Listen. Bye.
Welcome to episode 170 of the Yes Music Podcast, one fan's exploration of the world's greatest progressive rock band. I'm your host, Kevin Mulrine. Please remember, as always, how you can get involved with the podcast yourself via the various different ways on the site, yesmusicpodcast.com. First of all, apologies for the strange stereo effect of last week's episode. This was due to adding to the track by Edit Your Hometown. I've fixed and uploaded a new version if you're interested in listening again. Neil McCarthy this week pointed out a version of Astral Traveller by old friends of the YMP Schnauzer. It's very good indeed, so thanks, Neil. When I was searching for a YouTube clip of that, I also spotted a fan version of No Opportunity Necessary, No Experience Needed, which has been put together remotely by 5 musicians in different parts of the world. It's fantastic. Do take a look. Ben Craven has a new tune leak from his forthcoming album called Revenge of Dr. Komodo, which has again whetted the appetite. I'm waiting for a very exciting package to arrive from Bob Burns. More on that soon. On Twitter this week, Paul Wilson pointed out the new Toto album in advance of their tour with Yes, and Miguel Falcao celebrated Chris Squire's birthday with a tweeted link to his Amazing Grace cover version. There's another great review of early Yes material from Preston Frazier to enjoy. This time it's I See You. And finally, thanks to Mark Anthony Kay, Steve Rohr, and Jamie McQuinn for comments on the YMP blog. Of course, thanks to everyone who got in touch this week, and as usual, links for all that are in the show notes. By far the most tweeted and debated Yes topic of the week, of course, was the new boxed set, Progeny, 7 shows from 72, and now we know exactly what's in it. The 14 CD set is also available as a highlights collection on a double disc, and interestingly triple LP, which is extremely expensive, to please those of us who have recently rediscovered vinyl or never abandoned it in the first place. Alongside the highly successful teaser campaign on Instagram, Yes World have now published an elaborate product page all about the new collection. There's a colour-changing Roger Dean bubble logo, a large photograph of the whole package, and of course the obligatory pre-order now at Amazon button. Needless to say, it rather depends on what country you're in if you feel like pre-ordering this set. If, like me, you're in the UK, a search on Amazon for Progeny returns a selection of interesting items, but none of them are anything to do with Yes. If you're more interested in insect viruses, or rather odd-looking Kindle books, you'll be fine. But as usual, the country of origin of the band is not catered for in pre-ordering, at least via Amazon. Oh well. Anyway, back to the Yes World page, where it's confirmed that the recordings on the collection are from recently discovered sources, and includes 7 complete shows which happened in the weeks leading up to the ones featured on Yes Songs. I'm not actually sure that's quite right, as Yes Songs includes some material with Bill Bruford, which is clearly from before Alan White joined, and it's just Alan White on these recordings. I'm sure you'll let me know what's going on with this newest example of the horrifically complex Yes chronology. In some ways it seems a shame that the performances are presumably quite similar to Yes Songs, but as has been pointed out by some fans, this first release may be the start of a series of releases of archive material, which could be great. Certainly, given the lavish production quality of the package, it's fantastic to see the greatest progressive rock band in the world treated in this way, in a continuation of the Stephen Wilson remix philosophy. Other bands have had this kind of reverent attention, so why not Yes? The page claims that the recordings are of very high quality, and Rhino should be congratulated for releasing, as they put it, every note from all 7 shows, recorded in the fall of 1972, as the band's tour jumped from Canada to North Carolina, and then Georgia and Tennessee, before their last stop in New York at Nassau Coliseum on November the 20th. It's obvious that the vinyl 3LP selection pack will be compared directly with Yes Songs, so it'll be fascinating to see how that goes. Of course, it will be rather a different experience to have 7 complete shows in the full box set, rather than selection pulled together on Yes Songs, but the Highlights LP seems slightly oddly set up in direct competition to the original set. Yes World claim that the 7 shows are strikingly different, but I suppose we'll all have to make that judgment up for ourselves when we hear them. Would fans be as eager to buy 7 complete shows from, say, the Tourmato, the 9012 Live Tour, or even the 3-album tour of 2014? 1972 was indisputably an amazing vintage year for the band, but does 7 complete shows sound like too much to you? Let me know. One aspect which is certain is that the artwork for this set is amazing. Roger Dean seems to have pulled out all the stops and created classic Yes covers, Continuing the story of those wedge-shaped fragments of planet, there appear to be 7 brand new covers. The main painting is reproduced at the largest size and looks like it'll be used in full on the cover of the Highlights set. From the bubble logo to the lettering to the beautiful archetypal Dean moss-covered and floating islands, this is a treat for all Yes fans, and sets the tone for the musical content, as only Dean can. There are also 2 articles on the page, the first by Sid Schwartz. It includes some great archived photographs of the band, ticket stubs and posters. Schwartz puts the live recordings on Progeny into historical context, including Alan White's first concert experiences with the band. He points out that Yes premiered Close to the Edge at a concert they shared with the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and that the music of that band was to influence their music significantly in the future. Schwartz effectively paints a picture of Yes at the pinnacle of their popularity and powers, and goes on to talk about the recording of Yes songs, including the process, which occurred before release. As he puts it, Yes and producer Eddie Offord edited, fixed and sonically sweetened selected song performances. It's worth reading his explanation of how the tapes of the Progeny set went missing, were rediscovered, and the obvious love of the band and excitement at the process of releasing these lost tapes is infectious. As if to answer the critics' questions, he points out the differences between the recordings, and the fact that whole parts are now audible for the first time. If you are unconvinced by the value of the collection, do read Schwartz's piece. It may well change your mind. The second article is by Brian Cahew, identified as producer. This article is also full of fascinating detail, which is far too complicated to repeat here. One interesting area I did spot, though, was the difficulty of recording the bass and keyboards in those days. In one famous incident, the Mellotron picked up a local radio station, and the DJ could clearly be heard in the concert venue, as well as on the recording. Such was the state of technology in those days. Cahew says that the approach on Progeny was to give a realistic and historically accurate portrayal of each show, including the talking, tuning, and other stage moments whenever possible. So it sounds like this collection will be a far cry from Yes songs, including a lot of aspects of the performances which had to be cut out to keep the 3 LPs from spilling over onto 4 or more. If you're a bit of a technical musical geek, you'll love this write-up. In amongst all that excitement, however, I managed to speak to Clive Bayley this week from Mabel Greer's Toy Shop. It was a great thrill to speak to someone who was there and involved with the origins of Yes. And let's remember, Clive was co-writer of several tracks with Chris Squire and John Anderson. We did have a few technical difficulties, but the generous Clive bore with me, and I'm so glad I managed to capture the phone call. So here's how that conversation went. So it's great to speak to Clive Bayley from Mabel Greer's Toy Shop. Hello, Clive.
Hi there.
Mabel Greer's Toy Shop were right in the middle of the late 60s and early 70s music scene in London, and you did things like supporting Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd and playing at the Marquee Club many times.
Yeah.
Can you give us an idea of what it was actually like at that time to be there in the middle of it? And did you realise how important it was going to be to the history of popular music, in those days?
Well, it was certainly great fun to be there. So it was Flower Power. We're all a bit young. I was probably 16 when I started Mabel Greer. So Flower Power days, it was all happening down the King's Road. I used to hang out there and hang out in all the clubs. And it was a bit grey in the 60s, and it was breaking out against, really as a protest to start with, really against the sort of greyness and bureaucracy. So everyone kind of got onto the Flower Power thing, and lots of clubs and lots of happenings. And so playing music with Mabel Greer was great, because we were playing at the Marquee and Middle-earth and clubs like that. So yeah, it was all happening there. So it was a great time. Did we know it was going to be important going forward? Probably believed it at the time, yeah, because we were all full of ourselves, being 16. So, yeah, I think we probably did think it was slightly revolutionary, and, clothes, music, and the way people were thinking, it was good.
So it seems, looking back with no experience of it myself, looking at the vintage photographs and the archive footage and so on, it seemed like a pretty crazy, hectic time. Was it just one gig after another?
There were a lot of gigs. I mean, we tried to get as many gigs as we could, but when we weren't gigging, we were going around the clubs or, we're practicing. So, yeah, there was lots going on, and there were, lots of sort of, the press were sort of beginning to get in. They're saying, oh, what's this new scene happening? I remember ending up in the double-page spread in the News of the World, so how these deranged young teenagers were kind of wearing flowers in their hair and all that, and it was it was really funny. So yeah, it was happening quite a lot.
That's great. So you've spoken elsewhere, and I've heard the videos and so on, about when you and Bob met John Anderson, Chris Squire, Peter Banks, Tony Kaye, and even Bill Bruford very briefly at the end of Mabel Greer's Toy Shop. What did you think of them? Was it obvious that those characters were going to be huge global figures in the future?
Yeah. well, they all joined the band one after the other, and then it sort of just changed into Yes. So, I thought it would be big. There were different musical ideas going down at the time, so it was changing slightly. It was becoming less psychedelic and more something else, more technical probably. But yeah, I had no doubt that they were all great musicians, all of them. Bob, Chris, all of them. You know, Peter was a great guitarist, Chris was a great bass player, John was a great singer, Bill Bruford was a great drummer when he came in, Tony Kaye was great on piano. So it was all good. You know, I had no thoughts that they weren't going to be really good and big.
Yeah, and what about John Anderson particularly? Because, you know, he's achieved such a status within music. Did he have any airs and graces in those days, or was he just a regular guy?
I mean, John knew exactly what he wanted, and I like John personally. I mean, I haven't seen him for years, but I like him a lot. But he knew what he wanted. His music ideas were slightly different to mine. I was a bit more psychedelic and a bit more ideas and doing crazy things. And for me, I never repeated the same riff twice almost. So I was probably hell to play with. But John was definitely knowing what he wanted out of the music, what he was trying to do. So to do that, you've got to, if you hear something you want to go that way, you have to be fairly on it and pushing and say, no, let's do it like this, or let's play the song, it's going to be really good for us. So he knew what he wanted, which is great, nothing wrong in that. His music ideas were slightly different to mine, but his personal ideas were very similar to mine. So, yeah, I thought just knew what he wanted.
And what was it like writing with those two? Because we'll come back to your album in a minute, but you wrote with both Anderson and Squire.
Well, I can write a melody line all right, you know, so I like songwriting. In fact, I'm doing a lot of it now, but I really liked it then. And working with Chris was natural because he was putting down the bass, so, you know, we used to come up with ideas and we'll say, well, how about like this and like that, and similarly with John. So we did a lot of arranging together as well for the first album and stuff. So, you know, particular riffs or ideas, and so a lot of Mabel Greer went into the first album. Although I wasn't playing on it, I left just before they recorded it. So
we were just talking about before that little hiatus, about the arrangement work that you did for Yes's first album, and what I'm interested in actually also is the fact that in those days, Yes, and I presume Mabel Greer's Toy Shop used to do quite a few cover versions. Yeah. And Yes were renowned for their elaborate rearrangements of songs in those cover versions. Is that something that started off with Mabel Greer's Toy Shop?
Yeah, well, it did more when John came into the band. So it was right at the end of Mabel, and it was turning into Yes, I guess, because we did things like America and 8 Miles High and Carpet Man, stuff like that. Which right. John and Chris had a big thing in arranging that. That was not really my stuff. So, right. You know, mine was more the sort of the Mabel stuff from earlier. I think it's fair to say. I think it's fair to say that John and Chris were more responsible for how those sounded, not me. I was more in the psychedelic songs like Janetta and Beyond and Before, and to an extent Sweetness, and those songs that we were doing, an Electric Funeral and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, of course, and we'll get onto those in a sec. So did you actually play America with those guys at that time?
I practiced it, yeah. I think we played it live somewhere, yeah. And 8 Miles High and Carpet Man.
Yeah.
And but that was more John's influence, that.
Okay.
Because when he said, let's do Carpet Man, I thought, what? You know, what? But then, you know, when we sort of did it, more America was great.
Yeah.
That was clever. Carpet Man I didn't like. And so, but it was fine, you know, it was all experimental, it was good, but it was definitely moving to a slightly different direction there.
Okay, so just before getting on to your album, which is one of the important things, have you followed Yes's development over the years? And how do you think they've done, and what do you think of the current state of the band?
Well, they're, you know, great band, fantastic, and they're all really good musicians, fantastic musicians. I think Chris said, you know, Clive had a lot of ideas, but he couldn't play the guitar. So he wasn't quite as brutal as that. So he was okay on the guitar, but he was an ideas man. And that was true, because they're all really good musicians. I mean, I think I've improved a bit recently, probably old age. But at the time, I was really into experimental stuff and like playing the guitar with a violin bow. I think I did that before Led Zeppelin, actually, and just wacky stuff and coming out with some strange sounds. I really like that. And I personally had a lot of influence from Indian music, stuff like that. So currently, yes, to answer your question, I mean, yeah, they're great musicians and they brought out some great albums. The arrangements are really terrific and musically they're superb. some of it for me is like, my music's kind of, I guess, more straight from the heart and like just play it as it is in the moment without working it out too much. If that sounds, it's not really the right way of expressing it, but I'm more like, oh, let's do it like that then, even though we practiced it that way. But I don't think yes are very much, this is the piece of music, let's play it, which is great.
Yeah.
And the music is so complex that probably if someone went off on one, it wouldn't work. So I think that's the difference. But yeah, I've listened to their albums over the time, and yeah, they've got some great material in some of the albums. Every now and again there's a song which I particularly might like.
Okay, great. So let's get on to Mabel Greer's Toy Shop today then. So a lot of Yes Music podcast listeners are interested in why Mabel Greer's Toy Shop should reform in 2014 and release their debut album in a few days' time, so many years after first forming, which I understand is a Guinness World Record for the longest time between forming and releasing a debut album.
God, I mean, I did an album actually on the First World War about 4 years ago, and I put it together, and I thought that might be topical. I haven't done anything with it, but I kind of got back into playing music, and I picked up an electric guitar again, which I haven't done for a long time, although I've been playing a bit of acoustic. And I put an album together with a guy called Matt Davis, and my son Richard helped record it, and it's quite a nice album. It's all about First World War, some nice songs on there. We might take some of them and redo them. But then Bob tracked me down, so I met up, and we thought, hey, why don't we go into the studio for a laugh and see what's what? And then it turned into, well, hang on, let's relaunch Mabel Greer's Toy Shop. So I guess I was slightly ahead of the curve more than Bob in that I'd been playing a little bit. When we went into the studio and we were saying, well, let's just play. And we wrote some songs in the studio, and I thought, well, let's play some of the old stuff. And we played it by memory. Right. And started putting it together, and got hold of Hugo Barr, bass player, and just that then turned to let's go into a studio in Paris and do it properly. And so reforming the band kind of just happened. It was like, hey, that's a good idea. So there was no sort of, I suppose a little bit of unfinished business. Like we didn't finish what we started 45 years ago, so it's about time we did it. And it was kind of happenance. It just sort of happened. Then, having done that, then we got Billy Sherwood involved and Tony Kaye because we needed keyboards. And wouldn't it be great to have Tony, the original Mabel, on keyboards on the album? And got hold of Billy, and he said, well, I'm working with Tony, so that's not difficult. Right. And Tony agreed, so he did a great job and gave it that sound like it was in the 60s. And Billy reproduced it and put some bass on as well. And he got it and got down with it, and it came up quite good. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And then it was, well, we've got an album now. Let's push Mabel out there. Let's do it. Let's get it out there. So we got hold of the record company, RSK, Simon Carver, and we thought, let's release this thing. So it kind of snowballed from meeting up 45 years in Nice later and just saying, let's get the band together. And off it went. That's quite a rock and roll idea, isn't it? Just meeting up and getting on with it. Very rock and roll for us, yeah. So when you started to play things like Beyond and Before and Sweetness, which are both on the album, and they're lovely versions, I really, really enjoy those. Thank you. What did it feel like playing those songs again after so long, and knowing that they are, yes, classics, even though you co-wrote them? What was that like? Well, it was good. We thought, Beyond and Before, we thought, should we play it fast? Should we slow it down? It's quite a hard song to play, actually. Some of our new material is a lot easier to play, some of it. But it's quite a hard one. And when you're playing something which you co-wrote 45 years ago, you think, I remember coming up with that. There's a classic in the middle of Beyond and Before. We were in the recording studio, BBC, and Mike Leander, who's sadly not with us anymore, but he was with MCA and he was producing it. And he said, I'll never forget, actually, we played it. And he said, right, it's not going to work. You've got no middle eight. I'm going out to lunch. When I come back, I expect you to have written it, and we'll record it. So I had 1 hour to write the middle eight of Beyond and Before. Right. And I did. And talk about pressure. Yeah. But then it turned out really well. So there's a lot of sort of fond memories of Beyond and Before, like how it got together. And we always, with Mabel Greer, we always opened with it. Every time we did a gig, that was our first number. And then it appeared on the Yes album, and they opened with it on the Yes album, which is great. Yeah, yeah. And it is a hard number to play, but it is quintessential Mabel Greer and Yes. That song is kind of sums up at the time, let's bung in a middle eight. All right, well, how's that going to go? Oh, I know, let's do it like this. So, it's good. We played it in this little place called The Jam in Nice 2 weeks ago, just, a rehearsal room, but they had about 100 people in there listening to it. And it was playing it after 45 years in front of a tiny crowd, but it was like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is great. I like doing this. So fond memories of that. Sweetness, really tricky, because John's got a high voice, as you well know, and I can't reach those notes, not a chance. So I dropped it an octave or more, and in fact it's a little bit low to sing, but I thought, you know what, it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to copy John. I wouldn't dream of doing that. So I might as well just bung a vocal on it and see what happens, and change the guitar riffs, put some more sort of not interesting but strange guitar riffs, and make it more of an instrumental than the Yes one, and it kind of worked. So we thought, all right, I mean, some people are going to hate it and some people might like it, so there it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, I must admit I was slightly concerned to see that on the album, on the track listing before I put it on, because it does seem to be sort of defined by John Anderson's voice. But no, I think your version works just as well, actually. I really enjoyed listening to that.
Thanks. I think we had to do it. I mean, a lot of people said, oh, hang on, what are you trying to do here? We said, well, no, it was a Mabel song, you know, so we've got to do it. We can't not do it. So we did 6 songs that we used to play. And
yes.
There we go.
So there is quite an eclectic mix on the album there of old Mabel Greer's Toy Shop material and material you've written more recently. Do you think it reflects a bit of what's happened to you between 1968 and today?
Definitely. I mean, I've done lots and lots since then. I've had nightclubs and I've travelled around the world, and I've been in business and marketing, and similar to Bob Hager, really. So we've gone through. I've lived in America. I've lived in Middle East. I've been to the Far. You know, I've been around. So and a lot of time in the Balkans as well. So, for instance, one of the songs, not New Way of Life, My Only Light. So that is a traditional Balkan riff, and when you start the song, it's that da 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 da. That's very, very Balkan.
Yes.
So I took that and thought, you know what? Let's do a sort of love song ballad, but let's give it the Balkan treatment. But let's not do it their style. Let's make that, you know, an interesting guitar, and let's sort of push it up a bit, yet keep a sort of a ballady song. And that's one of my favourites. It works really well. It's got a lot of soul to it, got a lot of heart in it. And there is an example, if you like, of 45 years experience travelling around the world and listening to people and listening to music. So, yeah, you're right, it does change. And then New Way of Life, which is the title track, I wrote that in the studio when we first got together. I thought, well, let's write a song. Okay, let's do this one. And then that's very much sort of, what am I doing? What should I do now? What's it all about? Staring at the ocean, very emotional sort of, but really I was slightly worried because it sounds a bit like a country and western sort of treatment. And I thought, that's not really what Mabel was, but hey-ho, it sounds good, and why not make it sound a bit country and western? Why not? It doesn't matter. So
absolutely,
it's kind of a cross between it. So there are a lot of songs that do reflect experience over 45 years, and probably not having played in the middle of that, where you've had quite a long rest, and you've come back and you're looking at it with fresh eyes and thinking, okay, that was our sound, but what would our sound be now? What do we want to do? So I'm very much in the moment. Whatever it is in the moment, yeah, that sounds good. Let's try it out. We're not really keeping to an agenda of we're psychedelic only or we're flower power, because that's what we were. I think it's important to say, you know what, the world's moved on, we've moved on, let's play some of the old stuff and be true to it to a certain extent, change it a little bit. But the new stuff, let's play what we feel. So the next album might be something completely different. Probably will be. You know.
I mean, one of the other aspects, and the track which I enjoyed the most, I think, was the one called Oceans, which sort of segues into the track afterwards. And that feels a bit more progressive, a bit more experimental. How did that one come about?
Well, that one is a true in the moment. Let's just roll and see what we come up. We was in the studio and I just started playing that opening riff, da 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 da, and we didn't know what key it was in. Hugo didn't know what I was doing. Bob didn't know what I was doing. We just kicked off, but they all joined in. And then it was a moment. It really was a 67 psychedelic happening, because it was unrehearsed, no structure, planned, nothing. It was just like, just play in the moment what we feel. And it just happened. Yeah. So it was quite funny, actually, because we tried to play that the other day, and it was almost as good. But that we captured, luckily, Alex kept recording, because we didn't know we were recording that. Nice. Maybe that's why it's good. We didn't know we were recording it. You know, so we're not, because we only just started again, we're not hugely experienced musicians, you know, and I mean to play it again. Hugo is a bass player, but Bob and I are kind of catching up quick. So it was a pure, let's roll in the moment and see what happens. And it it probably does capture the essence of what we were like in the 60s, actually. If anyone does, it's that one, because it's absolutely true. In the moment, let's go, see what happens.
Well, it's an extremely enjoyable track, and 7 minutes of experimentation, really. It's great.
It is experimentation. And then we cut in Singing to Your Heart,
Yes.
which I think I wrote about 3 years ago. And it kind of works because you've got this psychedelic moment, and then the guitars suddenly put that riff in, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and it's like, what's going down here? And then, poof, in it comes. And it kind of breaks you out of the transcendental world into the rock, and I like that a lot, that track.
The contrast is great there. And just a couple more questions before we have to leave it. I was just thinking about your remote working with Kay and Sherwood. Now clearly you didn't meet up in the studio and work with those two. They did it remotely over the oceans. Going back to that theme again, I was just thinking about the way that you recorded in the 1960s. If the modern techniques of recording had been around then, do you think it might have affected the way that you created music, and maybe it would have been even detrimental to the way that you created music in the 60s?
I don't know. It's a great question because that is the point. With all the technology now and the affordability of being able to make some terrible mistakes and go and change them, and even change what you've put down, makes it completely different. Does that lose? That does lose some of the spontaneity and the magic. I'm a musician guy that loves the magic of the moment. When it goes in the moment, great. That's what I really like. With all the modern technology now, you can create a great sound. You can add strings and not, as you know, you change it, change everything. So it tends to take that little bit of magic out. Not necessarily. You can arrange it and make it sound good, but that real light, that real spotlight of magic, which you get in a live performance when suddenly everyone's together and the audience and everyone's together. With new modern technique, you're not going to strive for that. Whereas in the old days in the studio, it's like Mike Leander, you've got 1 hour to write in the middle. When I come back, we're going to record it. Right, let's go. And you might just capture that weird, mysterious music buzz, which I guess most musicians and a lot of listeners really want, that moment where you're elevated.
So clearly you're going to want to play some of this material live, and you've already said that you've met, and I think you've done one concert already. So what's the touring future, and then what's the future after that?
Well, we'd be delighted to play some gigs. We want to do a showcase in London.
Okay.
As soon as possible, and then we want to do a few gigs, and if the audience or if anyone likes the music, we'll do some showcase gigs wherever that might be. So we want to do a few of those this year. I've already got a second album,
right? Okay.
Got most of the songs for it, but we've got to go in the studio, and these are melody lines and songs. They're not, so when we go into the studio, we've got to turn those into the song. What's that going to be like? I've no idea. What treatment will it be? Will it be 60s? Will it be 2000? Will it be, what will it be? I don't know. So that's great. It's exciting, and I hope to do that this year. Billy's kindly said, come on, let's do that together. Come over to LA, we'll do that. So we'll either do it in LA or Paris, depending on who's, everyone's really busy. Like, can we get everyone together? But so the aspiration, I guess, for Mabel is to do some showcase gigs, and if we get offered more gigs, great, we'll do it, and then get the second album out and see what happens. And, if people like it, we'll keep doing it. If they don't like it, we'll probably keep doing it. We're mad enough. But if they do like it, it'll be even better. Great.
So just run through very quickly for the listeners who it is that's going to be playing those gigs.
Well, we don't know. Right now, we know we can gig with Hugo Barr, who's on the album, and Bob Hager on drums, and me on guitar, and Alex, who recorded us in the studio, Alex Alvarez, on the first tape before Billy reproduced it. He's a great guitarist, so he can play guitar, because some of the songs are about 3 guitar parts. So, we do have to have backup. And if we can get Tony and Billy to join in, we'd love to. But they're in LA and we're in Europe, so I guess if it's European gigs, it will be a guitar band. And if it's US gigs, then who knows? We might be able to get Tony on it, or with keyboards, and maybe even Billy. But it's just open at the moment. We don't know.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Clive, for talking and for bearing with me for the technical issues that we've had this afternoon. But it's been brilliant to talk to you. It's a great album, and I would recommend it to all the listeners. So thank you once again.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
I've heard all Yes Music podcasts every week. I love to hear what Kevin says. I've heard all Yes Music podcasts every week. I love to hear what Kevin says.
So that's just about all the time I have this week. Thanks so much for listening once again. I'll be back next week, but in the meantime, please do get involved by subscribing to the podcast via your podcatcher or web service of choice at yesmusicpodcast.com. You can leave a comment on the blog, send a tweet or direct message to @yesmusicpodcast on Twitter, send an email to show@yesmusicpodcast.com, or follow Yes Music Podcast on Instagram. You can upload an audio file or record a voice message via the buttons on the site, or leave a voicemail on 0844 579 6549 using the mailbox number 39417. So until next week, just remember, whatever your progressive rock question, the answer is yes.